Why don't we get it going? Welcome to Nuts and Bolts of New Ventures. As you see, my name is Joe Hadzima. I'm going to be your cruise director for the next 6 sessions as we try to figure out all of the nuts, bolts, and pitfalls of trying to start and launch and scale a company. So hang on tight. I should say, you probably know, we're going to be recording each of the sessions. We'll make those available hopefully the following day. They'll be posted on the nutsandbolts.mit.edu website with the relevant session. That's because some people are viewing this course asynchronously given the time zones. So we'll be doing that. The structure of most evenings is going to be like tonight. We'll have 2 parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about introduction to new ventures. You know, what are the questions you need to ask both yourself and about the idea or venture you're thinking about, some of the things to think about, and trying to set an overview for the course. And then we'll do about a 20-minute breakout sessions where we pre-populated those with people's selection for their first special interest group, just to make it easier to get going. So the purpose of those breakout rooms are, this course has been a font of a new company formation. A number of companies have gone on to enter and win the 100K competition, and many have gone on to do things in the real world. And so we want to foster the beginnings of collaboration, team formation, or at least a community around some of those interests. So we'll try to do that for about 15-20 minutes every night. I'll talk a little bit more about it as we get towards that part of the evening. And then we'll follow up with Bob Jones, who's going to talk about that all-important topic of customers, and you'll see why it's so important. So with that overview, let me sort of hop into it. The first question is, why are you here? Why are you taking this course? Well, you might not understand anything about entrepreneurship and you want to know more about it. Maybe you want to get your toes wet. That's the reason some people do the course. You might see something that sucks and want to make it better. And those are exactly the words that Drew Houston used when he told me about his frustration coming back from Thanksgiving vacation on a bus, and he had forgotten the disk that had his files and he had to get work done. He said, I'm going to figure out how to get my files wherever I am. And I said to him, well, that's cloud storage. I mean, Google does that, Microsoft does that, Box does that. So what do you think you're going to do? He says, well, they all suck. They just absolutely suck. And I'm going to make one that doesn't. And I said, sounds good to me. Off he went and started a company called Dropbox. So I still use Dropbox. So maybe you see something like Drew that sucks and you just want to make it better. Or maybe you have an idea or an invention and want to bring it to life in some way to change the world. That's perfectly valid, and we've had a lot of people try to do that, and some have succeeded. Or maybe you think being an entrepreneur is glamorous and you can make a lot of money. That's another motivator. Well, no matter what your reason, there are so many things you really need to, questions you need to answer. Like, how do I start? What do I do specifically? What is the problem that I'm solving? How does my solution solve that problem? Who cares anyway? Who cares about my ideas? Specifically, who cares? Who's the customer? And how do you find those people? Bob Jones is going to cover that in great detail tonight. How will I make money so I can have a sustainable venture? This is the business model or venture model. And I use money here as a surrogate for sustainability for a for-profit company. There are other ways to talk about sustainability for not-for-profit, and we'll touch on those. How long will it take to bring the solution to market? What will it cost? What resources will I need? People, money, relationships? Will I need to set up some sort of entity to attract investors and people? Should it be a corporation, maybe a limited liability company, something else? How do I keep people from stealing my ideas? Always a concern from the technology viewpoint. Will I need co-founders? And if so, what is our relationship going to be with each other and with whatever entity we do? Are we going to need an agreement? And what kind of things should be in the agreement? What pitfalls are there? How will I negotiate with employees, consultants, investors, strategic partners? How will I do that? Well, how do I figure out what I don't know? That's something I think most of us would like to figure out for everything, not just ventures. And what are the potholes in the road that may come up, and how will I recognize them and hopefully avoid or minimize them? So there are a lot of moving pieces here. And the question you need to ask yourself is, why do this? Well, maybe it's the reward. Maybe it's fame, fortune. You probably recognize many of these successful entrepreneurs. Is that the reason you're doing it? Well, if you succeed, you may be there. But let's talk a little bit about reality here. Only about 10% of startups actually succeed. I don't want to shock you too much, but that's the statistic, the gross statistic. And over 5 years, 62% fail due to a lack of preparation. And if you look at failures of startups, 95% fall short of their predictions, the projections they do. 80% fail to achieve their return on investment. 40% liquidate and lose their investment fully. And this one, although we can argue whether this is actually a true number, 99% fail because of lack of planning or experience. I think there's a lot folded up in that, and statistics around startups are a little tricky to get. But the point is, if you have a lack of planning and experience, your success is not going to be great. So, given all of that, here's some questions for you personally. Do I really want to do this? Should I do it? Why are you doing it? And I don't mean to be trivial about these things. The life of an entrepreneur is not all glamour. It's a lot of hard slugging work. And should I be doing it now or maybe later? Should I get some experience before I do it? Or should I jump in the deep end of the pool now? And really, is this for me? Is this the life that I want? Bob Jones is going to talk about that. We'll have a panel on founders coming up later this week. And these are the questions, actually, I talked to those people about last week. And these are the things they thought about and they still think about. So, I'm getting some notice here. Low systems resources. Well, we'll see. So why this course, given all of that? Well, I think the real thing here, this is not about theory, it's about doing. The people, there are plenty of people in academic world studying entrepreneurship, and it's great to have all those studies and to have frameworks. But the people, and I'll talk in a moment about how the course got started, the people that are going to be talking during this course are people who have actually done it and are actually doing what they're talking about now. So it's really trying to give you the kind of information to help you succeed more. And it's not just about planning and executing new ventures in terms of business. It could be any new venture. It could be nonprofit. It could be other things. That's why we use the term new ventures. Our goal is to increase your probability of success, so you are in the 10% that succeed. In the course of that, you may catch what I call the entrepreneurial thinking virus. And hopefully you do catch that. It's odd to talk about that during the pandemic we're in now, but it's a good virus. It's highly contagious. It's not known to be fatal, and it's a lifetime affliction. And if you catch it, you'll have a wonderful, well, interesting life. Let's put it that way. So how are we going to help you be in the 10%? Well, if you invest 6 evenings in this course, we're going to have you get newer enhanced skills in the following areas to be able how to evaluate a venture idea from an impact and an economic viewpoint. And these are important things because if you think about the resources you have, the most valuable resource you have is time. You can't get more time. And so when you look at an idea, either your idea if you're trying to launch a company or you're thinking about investing in a company and working with a company, the question is this really the thing I want to spend my time on? So you need to have skills like how do I evaluate a venture idea for an impact and economics? How do I figure out who my customer is and who wants what I have? Where do I find the financial resources to launch and grow? How do I scale and make it sustainable? And here we're assuming there's personal choice when you do a new venture, and there are lifestyle ventures, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just we find typically the MIT type ventures are ones that are looking for larger scale and impact, but there's nothing wrong with having a very successful smaller company that can make a ton of money if that's what your goal is. It's really about your personal goals. How do I build and retain a top-notch team of employees and advisors? In other words, your team isn't just the people who work directly with or for you, it's also the external network you provide, you create. How do you negotiate deals and resolve team conflicts? One of the things we'll hear about is how a failure in startups often is around team issues, where people aren't on the same page. What are the legal pitfalls that I need to know about? Some of these are very avoidable and you need to know about them. And if you don't know about them, you will fall into those holes and you may never get out. And how do I pitch my venture idea? So these are the kind of skills we hope you'll come out and the ability to much better off to do these kind of things by the end of the course. So let's talk about the course itself. This is really, course is a lesson in entrepreneurial action. So years ago, this is the 33rd year of the course. I was a little younger when I started. Students came up to me and said if I would do a course during IAP, in Independent Activities Period, on how to start a company. At the time, there was one course in entrepreneurship at MIT, and although hard to believe, but 33 years ago, there was one course on entrepreneurship. And although the students had taken that, they thought they wanted to know more about the nuts and bolts of doing it. So I said, well, thank you, I'll think about it, and I got swamped with some other things. And then this was pre-internet. Again, hard to believe, but they managed to get it in the printed catalog for IAP, and they sent it to me, and they said, we put it in the catalog, and we dare you not to show up. This is an honest-to-God true statement. So after I sort of got over being pissed about it, I said, well, you know what? I think I've got a customer here, somebody who really wants me to do something, so I got to figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, I only had about 3 weeks to put it together, so I picked 6 topics. We had, I think, 3 evenings back then that I thought people should know about in starting a company. And I didn't have time to prepare anything myself, so I called people that I knew and said, would you be able to talk about this? Or could you recommend somebody? And if you do, you better be darn sure that they're really good, because this is important stuff. And so that's what we did. And I'd never met 50% of the speakers. Half the speakers I never met, but I was relying on my network of people. I said to them, well, let's make it easy for you. I don't want you to have to spend a lot of time. So take 10 minutes and talk about maybe the 2, 3, 5 things, of whatever your topic is, that you wish somebody would have told you when you had started up. And then we'll do Q&A. And so I crossed my fingers, and it was a marvelous success. I just was blown away. We were concerned that we were going to get these speakers in. I did tell the students they had to pack the audience because I didn't want these outside speakers to come in and find 5 people in the front row. So we were in, if you know the room, 6120, and we had people in the aisles. So it was really a great, intense thing. And the lessons that I learned from that was that I had customers or a product, which was knowledge about how to start a company. And I had clearly defined the tasks to the speakers, the mission, if you will, the vision. and I got great people, and I apparently communicated well with them, and then I got out of the way and let them do their job. And that's how it started. And then several years later, as the 100K competition started to pick up, we made it for credit and advertise it more broadly. And the net effect is, we haven't kept a real count, but around 7,000 people, I think, have taken the course. It was the first class to bring together the management side of campus and the science and engineering side. A number of 100K winners came out of it. Some people quit their PhD programs and launched companies. I'm not recommending you do that necessarily, but that happened. And the key message that I think came out of the course was, you can do it. You really can. In fact, in year 2 of the course, I invited back somebody to just come and talk about what they had done. And he got in 10-250, the big lecture hall, started walking up the aisle, counted out 10 steps up, and then he counted 6 seats over and pointed to the person sitting there and said, "Get out of my seat." The student looks up and says, "What?" He says, "You're in my seat." "No, I was here." He said, "No, I was in that seat last year, and I listened to this course, and I said, I figured I could do it, and you know what? I went and did some stuff, and I screwed up a little bit, but you can do it too." And that was really astounding kind of thing. So that's the nature of what the course is. Whoops, let me go back here. Whoops, wrong way. So 2 themes have come about through the course through the years that I'll reiterate over and over again. Is there are 2 things you really need to do to have a successful venture. The first thing is you have to create value, because if you don't create value, you haven't done anything. So the subtleties under that are, well, for whom are you creating value? How much? How often? What does it cost? All of those kind of things. But you have to figure out, what value am I creating? And then if you create value and you don't do more, you're not going to go anywhere. So you have to figure out how to capture some of the value that you create so you can do it again. And that's the key part of the business models. So tonight's plan, with that quick introduction, is we're going to tell you a little bit about who you are. And we're going to introduce the teaching team. Then we're going to talk about our case study. And then I'm going to talk about some venture planning basics. We'll do the break for team building. And then Bob will come in and with his magnifying glass and help you find the customer. So, who are you? Well, let me get my notes, because you filled out forms when you signed up. Clearly, there's students from all of the schools at MIT, plus some other universities I'll talk about. We have alums, staff, faculty, and others. Over 300 signed up at the class website. The colleges that you've come from range from Babson, Boston College, Boston University, Caltech, Columbia, practically every school at Harvard, the education school, the Kennedy School, the law school, the med school, public health. We have Northeastern, we have UC San Francisco, University of Calgary, UC San Diego, University of Chicago, University of Florida, Rochester, Toronto, Wellesley College, and organizations, because this is open beyond MIT. We have Draper Lab, Facebook, Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, Mass General Hospital, Microsoft, Michelin, Samsung, PwC, Walmart, and a whole bunch of private companies you wouldn't have heard about because people are in the middle of doing it. The special interests, this gives you an idea of the breakdown of, you selected more than one, but here are some of the areas that we picked and the number of people interested, to give you an idea when you're thinking about the breakout rooms. It came out that one of the things we missed was robotics. So I don't know quite where we'll fit that, but there was a number of people interested in robotics. Now, there were specific skills or things expressed during the sign-up. I just read a couple of them to give you an idea of the breadth of things. One person said, "I tried 2 ideas and failed with any product until now. I made some mistakes. I want to bring innovation concepts to government, said another. Somebody wants sales and marketing issues in the medical device area. One wants to start a new business, having worked for 25 years as an employee. One is interested in starting ventures in emerging economies. Number of people want specific things: how to convert an idea to reality, how to test the viability of an idea, how to share an idea while ensure it's not stolen, how to form the right team. These are all things that we're going to be talking about. How to negotiate better term sheets with venture capitalists. We'll do that. How corporates can do a better job partnering with supporting startups. Previous experience. Just a sampling here. We have one 4-time founder of energy startups. We have one ousted founder of a company, at least one. These are all things you told us. First course ever taken. Several other MIT entrepreneurship courses taken. Somebody in the second year of a startup. Somebody took nuts and bolts 12 years ago. Back for a refresher, I guess. Always been in government, said another. 15 plus years of business experience in large companies, and several people from the MIT Venture Mentoring Service. So it's quite a diverse audience, and we have a lot to cover. So for first timers, soak it all in and try to recall some of this as you go forward. Look through the lens we're going to give you. And for more experience, try to use this to refine your thinking. I actually learned something every year taking this course. It makes me rethink things. So with all of that, and it is MIT, we have to go to an equation. And the equation is H equals R divided by E. And H, I'll help you here. H is happiness. And maybe the TAs could look at the chat and see if people want to volunteer what R and E might be, and let me know if anybody's coming forward.
We've got reality. We've got expectations, results, effort, return, rewards.
I'm disappointed in the Sloan people, because usually it's revenue and expenses. So the goal here is maximize happiness, and revenues and expenses are a subset of reality and expectations. So the point here is we're going to come to this equation several times during the course, but we have quite a range of people here. So we're not going to meet everybody's expectations. So temper them down. And in fact, if you can reduce them to 0, you'll be infinitely happy, but I know that's not going to work. And except for something I'll talk about in a few minutes, reality is somewhat fixed, so we can't do anything. The point of this is, in everything you do in life and certainly in ventures, is you want to keep the people motivated that are helping you achieve these goals, either through financing, advice, working, happy. And so therefore, you really normally can't control reality too much. So making sure you're clear on expectations and delivering on those expectations and exceeding what you say you'll do is a way to generally keep people happy. So enough for that equation. We'll come back to it. So that's who you are. And who are we? Well, all of our speakers, in fact, the only people, I'm not sure if the TAs are even getting paid. It might be the TAs. Everybody else is an unpaid volunteer speaker who have done or are doing what they're going to be talking about. One of the things about entrepreneurship is, if you've done it, I can't think of any successful entrepreneur who I've talked to who, if they're truly honest, won't say somebody helped them along the way. And there's very much a give back concept in entrepreneurs. So these people, have done and are doing what they're talking about, and that's why it's so compelling. And then we have our teaching assistants. So I'll get to them in a moment. Here I am. That was a picture of me yesterday, not exactly today, a few years ago. I've been involved in launching a whole bunch of ventures. I've been at Sloan for a number of years. I was a partner in a law firm, founding judge of the 100K competition, was involved in the enterprise forum for many years, and I'm doing some things now. So that's sort of my background. I have enough scars to be able to tell you these things. So switching to our TAs, perhaps you could take turns as your name comes up to just introduce yourself and say something. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you or e-meet you. Would have loved to see you in person. I'm Ezgi. I'm an MIT Sloan candidate. I'm in my first year. Prior to Sloan, I've spent 8 years in the consumer space with quite a bit of experience in brand strategy, film production, and I've worked a lot in the intersection of for-profit and philanthropy and social impact. Currently, I'm exploring a career in entrepreneurship. Would love to talk more about any business ideas. And I'm also one of the managing directors at the MIT 100K entrepreneurship competition. Hope to see all of your applications come in. Please reach out to me if you're interested in applying.
And the tradition has been that the incoming managing directors are the TAs, and this tradition carries on with another one of the incoming. Is Graz with us tonight? Or?
Yes, he is. He's on the call.
Okay. You want to just say
Hi,
anything
everyone.
quickly?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this class. My name is Graziano. Short version is Graz. I'm a Sloan Fellow MBA 2022. And with Jimmy and Ezgi, I'm one of the co-managing director for the 100K competition for the coming year. Before coming to Sloan, I was an entrepreneur in the international education industry. And I'm now trying to decide the new venture that will come from me after Sloan.
Okay. Maybe out of this class, we'll see. And Jimmy, you're on, I know, somewhere?
Yes,
or
I
maybe
am.
not. Okay.
Hello. So I'm Jimmy. I'm a 2023 MFin candidate at Sloan as well. I'm also one of the incoming managing directors for the 100K competition. Prior to Sloan, I worked in VC, investing in healthcare ventures, and on campus, I am part of E14 Fund as a venture fellow. I think you'll hear Habib talk as one of the speakers tomorrow, and he's the managing partner for the fund. My background's in finance and statistics at NYU Stern. So really happy to be here and listen to everyone's interesting ideas.
Okay, thank you. So let me see if I can introduce our case studies. This is the video that I had trouble with earlier today. We have a case study that we sort of touch on time to time in the background, and it's Virtual Inc. And this was a company that came out of the 50K competition. And this is an example of sort of the mission statement. It's a whiteboard kind of thing. In fact, let me show you if this works. Whoops, go back and try this again. There we go.
Unlike conventional interactive whiteboards, the small and portable Mimio Teach interactive system transforms any ordinary whiteboard into a state-of-the-art teaching tool. Quickly and easily, the system includes the wireless Mimio Teach bar and rechargeable stylus. It's so easy to set up, it'll be ready in just a few minutes. Simply place the Mimio Teach bar onto your classroom whiteboard. Plug in the Mimio Hub wireless receiver and launch the Mimio Studio software. Push the calibration button on the bar and the software will lead you through the process. That's it, the system is ready. Now you can start teaching with interactive lessons, websites, audio, video, and so much more. The Mimio Teach interactive system.
Okay, so that's what the product was. Why do we include Virtual Inc. In the course as a background type of thing? Well, first of all, the concept is pretty easy to understand when you see it. It's got a bunch of technology, but it's not so hard that it's rocket science. Yonel Cherry, pictured here, was an entrant in the 50K competition at the time, and this was his third attempt. So it shows you that at first you don't succeed, you might have to keep trying. It's also a very interesting story of the times and the company. This was the internet bubble. And Yonel provides an unusually candid insight. You normally don't get people talking about how things went wrong. They're always saying, you know, everything went right, and he's going to give you a very good insight into some things. So we'll refer to it from time to time, and the full plan is at Nuts and Bolts as well as at the Canvas site for those at MIT. So with that, let's get into venture planning basics and overview. So, let's go back to World War II a long time ago. One of the largest ever things done was the seaborne invasion at D-Day. 2,200 aircraft, 7,000 ships, a whole bunch of people. And Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander, at the time, later President of the United States, was quoted as saying, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." And that's what's really involved. We know that plans, you can write them, you can come up with them, they're going to change, but thinking about them, thinking about the venture, that's everything. And as you can imagine, things didn't always go right on D-Day, but ultimately they did prevail. So why make a plan or pitch deck or whatever? Well, because I have to. It's needed for financing, maybe strategic partnering. You got to explain the adventure to customers, suppliers, attract key people. But the real reason is you need to think of it as a roadmap for where you're going to go for the venture. And why make it? Well, because you need to understand it, really understand it. The plan is a result of a planning process. It may seem trite, but people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. And the kind of things that we're going to talk about in the course that are part of this planning is, who are your customers? Will they buy the stuff? What will they pay? How will you capture value for your efforts if you're not in a for-profit type thing? How will you make and deliver all this stuff? And what resources are you going to need? You really need to understand all of that, at least to think, what are the issues there? They may change, but if you have no clue, you're never going to get there. It's a really simple concept. Again, we talked about it earlier. It's create value and then capture it so you can do it again. We'll come back to this. So all the questions we're asking really address these two things. And if you can create value and harvest some of that, then you will have success in what you're trying to achieve. I like to think of this whole process as trying to build what I call a supported vision, a triangle, if you will, a pyramid. At the top, there's a mission statement, there's an elevator pitch, there's an executive summary, and there's a pitch deck. So the mission statement is a sentence or paragraph that easily describes what you're doing, and it may be very hard to describe a complex thing, but you should really work to that. An elevator pitch is 30 seconds. It's named that way because, if you're lucky enough to get into an elevator with an investor, you might have up to 30 seconds to explain what you're doing. And if she likes what you're saying, she may ask you to send in an executive summary. And if she likes that, you may get invited to do a pitch. And we'll have that's one of our sessions, how to put together a presentation for your business or your venture. The 10, 20, 30 is a famous Guy Kawasaki thing. 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 points on the slide. Now, this is really hard to distill this down to this part of the pyramid. It's not something many of us are easily do, but think of it as sort of music. You're not born knowing how to play the piano. You can learn how to play, and you've got to practice. And if you get it right, you'll do a reasonable job. You also have to have, underneath all of that, though, a full plan, I call it. It's just all of these things have to be nailed down in a way that you can articulate them or realize where the risks are. And there are the few people sometimes that can really do the top without the bottom. Beware, you could end up like Elizabeth Holmes, who pitched great at the top, but it just didn't deliver anything on the bottom. And as you may have seen, she has been found guilty on 4 of 11 federal charges just recently. So back to the H equals R divided by E. In the case of Steve Jobs, and Elizabeth Holmes mentioned Steve Jobs, there was some ability to change perceptions of reality. And Jobs called that the reality distortion field. I'm not recommending you're doing that. You have to have all these things together to really make it work. So that's what we're aimed at, to try to figure out what your venture is be able to articulate the top of the pyramid, and make sure you can deliver on the bottom of the pyramid. So how do we go about doing that? Who should develop the roadmap? Should it be the founders, a team, an outside consultant? Well, you really do need to own it yourself. Charlie Tillett, who's going to be speaking on financial projections next week, was taking the course, and I had some Indian entrepreneurs that were really fantastic at what they're doing. They were very struggling to try to put together a plan or articulate it. And I told Charlie about it, and he's hopped. He was just graduated from Sloan. He had actually placed second in the 10K competition back then, hopped in his pickup truck, went out and visited them in a strip mall, in a room 10 by 15 with 6 people in it, got interested, joined the company, didn't get paid for a while, but 6-7 years later was CFO when it went public. And he helped them write the plan, but they had to own it. The point is, you can get help, but you need to own it in the sense of understanding it and being able to communicate it. These are the kind of things that should go into your thinking. These are the main categories. And we're going to talk about some of them tonight, most of them during the course. An interesting one to keep in mind is the third from the bottom, critical risk problems and assumptions. Whatever you do, there are going to be risks, and you really need to think about what your alternatives are if you encounter those risks. Notice, however, that technology is not automatically a section, because when you're thinking about a new venture, people don't really, most people are not interested in the technology by itself. It's really what kind of value can you create with it, and how can you make an impact with it, not the technology per se. It has to be there to do something. So let's go and look at the executive summary part. This is usually the standalone document, 2 pages or less. It's the first thing investors read, and it's like a resume. You should think of it. The resume gets you an interview to give a pitch. For a job, it gets you an interview to get a job. And what investors, over the years, I've realized what investors really look for are the 3 whys. First one is, why this? And you should think about this too. When I say investors, I mean you as entrepreneurs also investing your time. Why this? Why is this something important that I should be working on? Is it major? Does it have a big impact? Why this? Why now? Why is this the right time to do this? And I'll talk about that with some case studies here in a moment. And why this team? Why do I think this team is the right team to do it? Now, an example of a very good pitch that encapsulated all this was the Amy Smith pitch that she gave in the 50K competition. Amy went on to get a MacArthur Genius Award, and she stood up in Kresge Auditorium and said, I can almost recite it from memory. She said, 1.9 billion people on the planet don't have access to clean water. Big problem. Who knew? The only way to test for biological contamination is to get a sample and incubate it for 24 hours to see what's growing. The only incubators are powered by electricity. The 1.9 billion people that don't have access to clean water pretty much don't have access to electricity. I've got an incubator that doesn't require electricity. Are you interested in hearing more? It was so concise as to what the problem was and what her solution was. It was very much telling. And that's the kind of thing you want people to say, I want to hear more. And the fourth why, if you get them interested, is they'll ask themselves, why won't this work or succeed? What's wrong? Is it an execution problem? What's wrong? But you don't get to 4 unless you can convince the others. So think about this both as an investor and as investing your time as an entrepreneur. The executive summary, again, 2-4 pages. It has to be clear. And it's, again, like a resume. If it gets the reader's attention, you should want to hear more, and that's how you get to get the pitch. So keep thinking of the pyramid as you're putting this together. It's going to tell you who you are, what your strategy or vision is, what you're doing or propose to do, what is the market or impact potential, how much money do you need, and what will you do with it. Please don't put terms in an executive summary, though, because there are securities law issues we'll talk about when we do legal issues later. And also investors, despite Shark Tank, where they tell you how much they want for X% of the company, investors are going to pretty much dictate the terms. What is your sustainable competitive advantage? How are you going to sustain whatever it is? When you're done, the reader should be able to explain what you're doing. Again, this is hard to put together. It's the famous quote, was it to Mark Twain, if I had more time, I would have made it shorter. So here's an example of the Virtual Inc. executive summary. It's in the materials. It's not the best, and don't follow it blindly when you're doing your written requirement that we'll talk about. I do want you to focus here on what the costs are. Initially $320,000, further investment of $2 million. Keep those in mind when Yano comes back and tells you what actually happened with Virtual Inc. Okay, I want to go through a few topics here to cover the opportunity. These are the questions you should be thinking about because you need to know, but along with investors and others. What is the market or the opportunity? How big is it now? So think of how big is the taxi market today? And what are the trends and how fast is it growing or will it grow? So your Uber, how do you figure, are you expanding a market beyond taxis? Think about that. How big is the opportunity? Why is this time the right time for your product or service? Often this is convergence of opportunity and solution. So in the 100K competition, one year we had a great plan that talked about how they were going to revamp the air traffic control system of the United States. It was wonderful technical discussion about the problems and how they were going to resolve it. And they didn't go past the first round of the competition. They came up and said, what didn't you like about our presentation? And the answer was, well, look, you've got to change the whole air traffic control system to do this. That's just not realistic. And they looked at the judges and said, well, didn't you know that the FAA just put out a request for proposal to change the air traffic control system? And the answer was, no, you never told us that. That was an opportunity that we missed as judges and other people would have missed. It was there an opportunity finally that there was going to be a change and they were in right position with a solution that would have made a difference. On the other hand, 3D printing, fantastic technology, has only recently come to the fore. The original patents have expired, and that's because the technologies that required the full implementation to something more than just plastic stuff wasn't there. There wasn't material science advances, there weren't sensors, all those things. Recently, there have been improvements that you can now print metal parts. So sometimes it takes a long time to be an overnight success, and you don't want to be there too far ahead of the curve. Trust me, I've been ahead of the curve too often, and it's painful. Now, market analysis, you've got to be thinking about, well, what are the plans for your products or services in the marketplace? What sectors are you going after? What are the competitors? And don't say there aren't any, because one competitive thing is they just may not buy your thing. They may not see the need for it. So what are your competitive advantages? And can you estimate what your potential shares are? A good exercise is to pretend you are somebody like the Airbnb founders and say, well, how big could this be? And how would we disrupt the market? And then finally, a question that I've heard venture capitalists say, who loses if you win? And what will their response be? And so again, Andy Gross, the founder of Intel, famously said, only the paranoid survive. So you should be thinking about that. You need to think also about your go-to-market strategy. How are you going to bring whatever you're doing to fruition? What's the pricing and distribution if you're selling something, or your monetization plan if you're trying to figure out how to monetize something other than selling it directly? Your distribution and strategies must match the pricing. In other words, you're not going to sell a $50,000 piece of equipment online. That's more of a direct sales, large touch viewpoint. On the other hand, If you're trying to do direct sales for something that costs $10, that's not going to work economics. So having those things match are important. And sales, who's your first customer, the second customer? How will you reach them? And what's the cost of that? Bob will talk about that in the second half of the evening. And something I also have heard at VCs talk about is, well, will the dogs eat the dog food? This all sounds really great, but is there any evidence that anybody really wants it? Is anyone buying this? Or why do you think somebody will want this? Development planning, often for most of the people that would come out of MIT, there's some technical component to it. So where is it today? What's needed to get it to where it needs to be? As an entrepreneur, you want to avoid the nuclear fusion problem, as I call it. You don't have nuclear fusion until the whole thing works. That's been going on for 70 plus years, and even despite billions having been put in the last couple of years, it may still be a number of years ahead. So can you actually put a product into the market that doesn't require the complete solution? This is sort of the minimum viable product, maybe enhanced a bit. And what are the difficulties and risks in the development? And do you have some plans for what comes next? Are you a one-trick pony? You should focus on what you're planning to do, but you should be prepared to talk, if asked, about broader things. And then action planning. Well, what specifically will you do and when? I like to think about identifying credibility testers. That, you know, engineers, as engineers, we're trained to think about all the things that have to happen to put it together. But often there's some specific things that if you could solve, you could show that it could work. So think of, you're building a bridge in San Francisco Bay. You know, maybe the credibility testers are, well, you can't sink pilings, it's too difficult, or you can't get access roads. If you could identify and show you could achieve that, then you could probably raise the money to do the rest of it. This is sometimes called about sequencing to build value, or de-risking the project. So investors say, well, you've taken a lot of the risk out, now I'm willing to invest, or I'm willing to give you a better value. You want to think about eliminating or reducing dependencies. You don't want to be dependent, if you can avoid it, on others having to act. So Zipcar, for example, is you rent a car on demand versus Uber is an example of two different types of dependencies. In the Zipcar case, they had to get governments to agree to give up parking spaces. They had to figure out, how to have you book cars, return them, pay for them, all of that. Uber, on the other hand, didn't have to build any of that, just the app. They didn't need government permission, at least going out the door. And they didn't have to buy the cars, which Zipcar did. So eliminating or reducing dependencies can help. Zipcar was a great idea. There were too many moving parts. I saw the plan early on and I said, this is too many moving parts. And if you look at the history of Zipcar, it did change urban transportation, but the investors and the founders really didn't make a lot out of it at the end of the day. Finally, as you're thinking about what you're going to do, you need to think about coordinating the schedule, the value recognition events, and the financing requirements. In other words, you don't want to be caught running out of money between value creation points. This is sequencing your plan to show that you can deliver. If you are caught more than once between value creation points and you're managed to raise additional money, you may raise it at a lower valuation, something that you'll hear about from Donald on the last day of class. So that's sort of my quick introduction to the things, the kind of questions that you're going to need to think about, and we're going to try to answer those over the next 6 evenings. Think of the vision, the supported vision that you're trying to build as a touch point. And I wanted to sort of remind us about H equals R divided by E, be on the right side of that. And then just a quote I heard the other day from a friend of mine who got funded years ago by Vinod Khosla. He asked for advice, and Vinod said, well, you'll face about a dozen real challenges in developing the technology and venture, which is common for most ventures. 5 of these, you'll be resourceful enough to find solutions from your background, the field, ecosystem, friends, and colleagues. An additional 5 of these, you and your team will be smart enough to solve yourself. So my friend said to him, well, what about the remaining 2? And Vinod smiled apparently and said, well, with these, you better get darn lucky. And, luck is, don't pass on luck. Luck is a good thing. What we're going to try to do next is try to help you down a path where you might get more luck by taking a break for team building. So that's the breakout rooms. We get you to start talking to people who have similar interests. Maybe together you'll be able to enhance your ability and increase your ability to get some luck. So the TAs have set up breakout rooms based on your selected interest groups. Once you're in there, you can move to other groups. We're going to be doing this each night, so I would say, spend some time in there and take advantage of it. When you're in the room, I will jump around to some rooms, but we don't have people moderating them in any way. So probably the best thing to do is to take turns introducing yourselves if you feel you want to. Take less than 30 seconds. My name is Mary and I'm interested in this and I'm looking to build a team, or I'd like to join somebody with that, or just what your interest is, and see if during that period of time you can get enough of you to understand each other and maybe connect outside of class. We may do something like Slack or something. We haven't really talked about that yet. And when we come back from the breakout, I'll talk a little bit about course logistics for those taking the course for credit, and then we'll hear from Bob Jones. So with that, I turn it over to TAs and whoever's setting up the breakout rooms. Tell us what you'd like us to do.
Okay, awesome. So I think for the people who replied to Joe's email in the beginning, saying that they have one specific choice of room that they want to join, the most recent email, I've set up around 60 of those people into breakout rooms. There are, I think, 16 or 17 of them. And for the rest, feel free to join whatever room matches your interest. So I'm going to open the room and then we'll come back here after 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay, so just the time-wise, let's say it's 7:15 we'll be back, because I see Bob has joined us and I know he's raring to go, right, Bob? Okay, so 7:15 we'll be back, and away to the breakout rooms.